All righty. So welcome everybody to Telling Your Head Start Story, Part 1, telling human stories backed up with data. One of our fun stories today is the excitement of getting all the Zoom stuff rolling in there and getting everybody admitted. One of the things I do have to say right up front is we are recording this webinar. We do share the webinar with all the folks who registered, whether they could attend or not. So this is being recorded. We have complied with the rules of various states and have informed you of that. If you have any discomfort of being on something that's recorded, generally speaking, you have the opportunity at this point to exit if you need to. But hopefully you won't, because we have some cool stuff to talk about, and it's always more fun to have it be live than on the recording. So we're going to roll through pretty quickly today. We've got a pretty decent pace that we're going to go through because we do want to walk through some examples of different kind of things, and we do want to kind of have this emphasis on actually working through and really getting a good feel for what the storytelling parts are and how we can relate real human stories to our wider efforts at storytelling, the points we want to make using data as a support and as an exclamation point. So I will go ahead and just get us rolling today. So this is Acorn Learning. For those of you who are not familiar with us, where Head Start goes to sustain positive change. And we are really a professional development company that emphasizes the practical application of best practices in programs to build and sustain positive change over time. So if you're looking for program improvement, information on management techniques, the use of data for quality improvement, but also just how do you do things a little bit better in each program, that's what we do. acornlearning.com has all of the various things that we have, including a couple of new things, which I'll touch on at the end. So we have lots of good professional development out there for those programs that are looking for it. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. We have some webinar basics. I'll talk about storytelling. We'll have some different examples of stories with data, and we're going to talk about an approach to human-centered stories with data that derives from the examples that we're going to share. And we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, and we'll have some fun and exciting what's happening with Acorn moments at the end, so you can see the different things that we have, like I mentioned, including a couple of new things. So hopefully you'll be able to stay with us to the end and hear about those. There's two of us from Acorn here today. There's myself. I'm Dr. Greg Dixon, the Chief Learning Officer, and Stuart Jones is here, our CEO. He's on mute right now. He'll jump in. Trust me, that mute won't last long in these sorts of things. He's got a couple of things he's going to do later on that he's going to talk about, and we're going to really focus today on engaging with storytelling for a lot of different reasons. The webinar basics. The webinar is being recorded, so all the folks that are coming in right now that are joining us, I did announce it at the very beginning, and I'll remind everyone again, we do record the webinars, and the recordings are shared with everyone who registered. So anyone who registers, whether they are here or not, can have that information. Live captioning is turned on, so you can hear an AI-generated transcript of everything that I'm saying, which is about 99% accurate. And participants are all muted. When we get to the end of the Q&A, there'll be an opportunity to unmute. We also have a short anonymous survey at the end, and it's important for us to always say, we take the information that you provide to us very seriously because we are always looking to make things better. What topics do people want to hear about? What can we do to engage the community of Head Start programs out there in the world more effectively? We are here to help you, and helping us to know how to do that is a big part of what all those surveys are about. So please take the time to fill that out if you are able to do so. In addition, there are some basic pieces that we always like to let everyone know. The big question we always get is about the slide deck. The slide deck will be emailed at the conclusion of the webinar, along with a link to the recording. Any questions you have as we go can be entered into the chat. Sometimes we'll stop and tackle them. Other times we'll tackle them at the end as part of the Q&A. So definitely feel free to use it as you go, though, and to add your questions in there so that we can check them out as we go along. So big thing that we need to do right off the bat, which is to say congratulations. Head Start is coming right up on, actually just past our 60-year anniversary of the start of the first program way back in 1965. One of the most successful anti-poverty programs the federal government has ever had. So this is not just a program that's been around for a long time. It's a program that has been doing a lot of positive good in communities all over the country for 60 years, and definitely a very worthy time to sit and celebrate just how much of an impact Head Start has had. And one of the big things in the current environment in which we're operating, and one of the reasons that we're doing a lot of storytelling rather than some more compliance-oriented webinars in the summer, is there are a lot of people who think that 60 years kind of might be enough for Head Start. And so there's a lot of debates about funding and things like that. Head Start is one of the most successful anti-poverty programs. It has had an enormous impact over 60 years consistently. And so we want to be able to tell those stories, not just in a big policy sense, but the human stories of the individuals that are actually involved in Head Start programs, not just the parents and families in the programs, but also the staff and the impact that Head Start has on communities. So 60 years, hopefully we will have at least 60 more of continuing to help families get out of poverty and to break the cycle of poverty in America. So congratulations to Head Start for 60 years of success. What I'm going to start with is a discussion of some basics about storytelling. We don't have enough time to go into a lot of different pieces of storytelling as an art form and as a practice that you can engage in. But I do want to cover things a little bit so that that frames the discussion we're going to have when we start to actually look at the examples and when we talk about how these different things work in practice. So I'm going to start with some storytelling basics, and then we're going to move into some examples. So if you go look and say, what is storytelling? And you enter it, nobody just searches on Google anymore and everyone puts it into ChatGPT or puts some AI. One of those things will come to you is a whole list of storytelling, a lot of which is around television or novels and things like that. When we're talking about storytelling in our context, we're really talking about communicating a narrative that engages and connects to an audience to convey a message. We're not trying to get the next big hit on Netflix or Amazon Prime. We are trying to communicate to a wide range of different people in a bunch of different contexts, but with a shared mission and message about Head Start and what Head Start is able to do. But having said that, there are a lot of different messages that programs will want to convey, and thinking about what the best ways are to convey those messages in a way that's impactful, that will connect to an audience and really get them to see the message in the way that you intend them to. So our focus on storytelling here is about having that narrative that you communicate and that will engage and connect with the people that you're talking to, whoever they are. There's some basics with storytelling, and I do want to just kind of cover these quickly. Again, because of time, I can't get into each and every one of them, but they are definitely important. The one thing that you will see absolutely everywhere when you look for best practices around storytelling is knowing your audience. In Head Start, you've got multiple audiences. You don't just have one. When you are trying to tell a story about the value of your program and the impact that it can have on families who enroll as a form of recruitment, that is not the same audience as when you are talking to your policy council, or if you are part of a larger organization, to a board or other folks that are going to be making decisions about things like budgets and the future. So your audience is going to be a really important part of that engagement. So knowing who they are, thinking about how you can communicate to them and how they're going to receive your communication is a big, important part of it. A big piece of what we're trying to do is we're trying to convey ideas and have a message land with our audiences. And if you want to do that, you have to have a clear message. If you cannot articulate that one clear takeaway point that you want them to walk away with, it's not very likely that they're going to get it from your storytelling. So you want to have that clear message, that thing that's right there that they can really see and engage with and take away from your efforts of communication with them. One of the interesting things about storytelling is humans, as a natural part of who we are as entities, we like to hear about how individuals have overcome challenges that face them. So focusing on challenges, difficulties that people have had, and how they have been overcome is a key part of storytelling that will pull people in and make them feel a more direct connection to your story. Human beings like engaging with other human beings. Every single one of us has been challenged, has struggled, and has overcome that challenge. Or sometimes we've actually had challenges that we can't overcome for a variety of reasons. We like seeing and hearing stories of people who have engaged in these challenges and overcome them. And in the context that we're talking about, how Head Start has helped them to overcome those challenges. In doing this and in thinking about how we engage stories, It's okay to embrace tension. Sometimes we want to paint a picture of a perfect world. Head Start programs are dealing with folks all over the country who are living in poverty. And regardless of whether the economy is booming or falling off a cliff, it's challenging to live in poverty in the United States. And there's an inherent tension that's involved in that. And I don't mean here embrace tension by rallying people up to be mad at other people or feel hatred or anger. I'm saying that we want to acknowledge and recognize that there's stress involved and there's difficulty. And that is part of our stories because that's part of the real human experience of all the things we're talking about. When we are telling stories, you want to engage and embrace personal connections. You want to seek out a way to have a personal connection. And whether that's telling a story about yourself and important things that emerged about how you as an individual person were impacted by what you're talking about, or having a story about a person in your program, a human being that you can draw those connections to, that's really important. And finally, you want to be authentic. One of the things that people always stress over in telling stories and in standing up in front of a group of people and talking, or even in designing social media posts, is there's a desire to have something that's perfect, that's something that's like, oh, it's the exact reflection of everything we want. It's much more important to be authentic. If I tell you that I'm very interested in storytelling, and I say it's because of this great policy thing, and it's all wonderful how it came together. And we had these statistical analyses, and we were able to come up with these models that predicted outcomes, and we were able to help programs increase by a certain percentage the degree to which people were coming in and engaging in attendance. Fine, that's a good, it's a story. But if I tell you that my real encounter with storytelling that makes me like storytelling as storytelling is from reading the Epic of Gilgamesh way back in the day when I was a little kid and having it be interesting, and then reading it again as an adult in its full version and seeing how the character who's deathly afraid of death, he goes on this giant quest to become immortal, and he fails. He doesn't become immortal, but he learns the value of living his life. That is a more powerful story about why storytelling is cool than the story about all statistics and everything else. So the authenticity of why it is that you're engaging with it will come across better than something that sounds like a constructed story that fits what people might think that someone is supposed to say in a particular context. So the authenticity is important. All of these things are going to come together in the different things that we talk about as we go through. The single most important thing in any time you talk about storytelling with data, every presentation I give, doesn't matter the context, doesn't matter the audience, I always have basically this same slide. Humans do not remember data. It doesn't matter how well you construct it, doesn't matter how cool your visualizations are, it doesn't matter anything like that. We are hardwired to remember other people and other humans because that's how we are built as physical machines, animals, whatever you want to use as the metaphor. Humans remember and engage with other humans. And this has big implications for when we're going to use data in storytelling. One of my favorite examples of this is way back in the day when we first started doing consulting. We would go and we would present results. And this is a box and whisker plot. And if you are a statistician or a methods person, you love box and whisker plots because an enormous amount of data can be conferred in a plot like this. The difficulty with it is your audience will forget it about 3 seconds after this image goes away on the slide because, yeah, there's a lot of information in it, but it doesn't register. It's not a human story. If instead I have, as part of a presentation, a mother kissing her child, people will remember that. There are students who couldn't tell you a single thing about a thing that happened in the data analyst certificate class 7 months ago, but remember that my cat came in and I have this really cute cat that occasionally makes a guest appearance because she wants to chew the microphone cord and I have to move her. So she's occasionally on that. People remember the cat because it's a cute cat much more than they may necessarily have remembered that in that we were talking about data structures and database architecture. So you will probably, in fact, I would bet money that you will remember the picture of the mom kissing her baby long after you remember that it was a box and whisker plot that was on the screen next to her. So when you are crafting your stories, you always want to remember people remember other humans. So storytelling using data, your story should always be about people, Data is going to generalize the story. So data is going to take this individual person's story or this group of people's story and talk about how that story reflects everybody else. These people are the people that you know and you connect with, but also there are many, many more people like that. And then data can add an exclamation point by saying it's not just there are more people like that, there are a lot more people like that, and we are helping them all in Head Start because that is what we are here for. So when we're thinking about storytelling, one of the things you want to do is don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. Go look at what other people have done and evaluate those pieces of storytelling. When you create something within your program, take a look at it, share it, have people talk about it. Don't just think about it as you, as a Head Start expert, looking at something that you're going to put out in the world, whether it's a social media post or it's a chart you're going to put in your annual report, any of those kind of things. How would a person interpret what you are using? And there's a good frame of this. One is a reporter and the other is an elected official. Especially, I had these in there for lots of different contexts, but this year it means a lot more to have that elected official in there and also to have that reporter in there. Most reporters are knowledgeable about the things that they write about, but they are not experts. So Head Start might be going back and forth with someone who is the education reporter, but that person's experience is 99% K-12. They don't really understand Head Start. What are they going to see with the information that you've provided them? And regardless of how you've provided that information, what does this look like? The most important thing to take away is what is the message you are trying to convey? And does a person who is not a Head Start expert, not part of your program, who sees the visual representations you're creating, does that fit your story? Are they going to take away what you want them to see? So in the next two slides, we have slides from the annual reports of real Head Start programs. And one of these will be familiar to anybody who's in the data literacy credential because you'll have seen it. So I'm going to hand it over to Stuart Jones at this point to walk you through these. And these are actual slides from actual reports. So I just literally Stuart went to Google for the first one. I went to Google for the second one. And we found real reports who had some interesting visualizations, which we're going to talk about here in the next couple minutes.
Great, thanks, Greg. Hi, everybody. First, I'm Stuart. Second, thank you for taking your time to join our webinar. Third is we want to give you something you can walk away with that will help you right now because it's more important than ever. So again, went to Google, typed in, quote, Head Start annual report, end quote. This is one of the very first things that popped up. And I want to make sure I'm giving a couple disclaimers. One, I haven't identified what agency this is. Two, you'll see at the bottom, it says 2020-21 Head Start report. So it's dated. Number three is it was taken right from their school readiness section. And it's a good illustrative example for us to lean in and talk about a little bit. So you'll notice this is how we learn on the left side. It's on page 8, it's 2021. Assessment outcomes. So you can assume this is DRDP or Core Advantage or TS Gold or one of the main assessments for 4-year-olds. And you'll see it says mid-year assessment results for 4-year-olds. And then we've got these 4 domains: approaches to learning, social and emotional development, language and literacy, cognition and general knowledge, and perceptual, motor, and physical development. And it's a bar chart, basically working from left to right, showing of the 4-year-olds how ready they are for kindergarten. And you'll have this one big headline at the top: 75% of students will reach school readiness goals as they transition from Head Start to kindergarten. It's also got a reference line, Head Start goal, and that reference line is somewhere placed, I'm going to say, at the 85% mark going across. And now you've got the ability to see high and low and overall percentages with the headline. Greg, if you could back up one slide just momentarily, I want to reset this. So when we're talking about context, and Greg just went through storytelling is a responsibility. You want to appeal to the human side of things. Someone's going to write a human headline. How does this affect humans? How would a person interpret what you're using? A reporter, an elected official? Does it fit your story? Go ahead, Greg, go back to the slide. The story here is We're doing good work from the agency's perspective, from the school readiness team's perspective. We're doing great. There's something here we're sharing with you on purpose. This has been published in our annual report. So when you're talking about storytelling, I'm open the annual report. It's a glossy book. And I'm like, I like this. This is good. It's glossy. It's colorful. There must be good things in here. I'm wondering now the context of this page saying, what am I supposed to think about the humans? Now, Angie, Wendy, Bonnie, Crystal, Dennis, we got a small group here today. I'm inviting you in the chat right now. When you're looking at this, what's a headline you would write as a journalist? What's something that you would, as a public official, look and go, huh, this means to me this about the money, about the investment, about the what's happened here. So if you would like, I'm inviting you in the chat to write a headline like a journalist would write. And it's not necessarily going to be flattering here because we've got bars with different amounts. We've got a big, huge number featured of 75%. So I'm wondering if anybody wants to take a stab at this in the chat right now. And I know we're on a webinar, we're not in a live class, but if you do want to take a stab at it in the chat, go ahead and take a stab at it in the chat. I'm going to drop one in the chat right now. I'm going to write mine. I'm going to wait to hit enter. If anybody else wants to just say, this is my headline. This is one thing that I thought when I opened it up, just as I'm a teacher, I'm a dad of 5. 75% of students who reach school readiness goals. What about the other 25%? I wonder that. 75% in most of the world of school and assessment is a C. I think we can all agree to that, solid C. Is the program saying we get a C? So that's one. Is there anything else that pops out at you from the chart? And I think I can write another one here. So the second headline would look something like this. What happened with language and literacy? So your eyes go to it and you see 53%, and you go, half the kids can't read. And Monica, you got that. This was the headline, right, Monica? XYZ program struggles to prepare children in language and literacy. Wendy's is 2 of 4 goals met. Wendy, exactly. And Angie, our program's approaches to learning is working when it comes to social and emotional development. So you could say the same thing about perpetual motor and physical. We're doing great here. This works here. We're crushing it here. So thank you, Angie. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Wendy, for getting into the chat. Because when you look here, our eyes, just like Greg said, we're going to look at what's the human story. The data part, 53%, they're just figures and charts and numbers, but we want to make it a human story. So the human story here is 1/4 of the kids aren't ready for school. Half the kids can't read. We're struggling here compared to the other thing. So I want to amplify Greg's point. Greg, I'm going to have you do the next slide. As I'm looking at this, I'm thinking the context is important. Here's the takeaway from the slide. 1, remember that as a Head Start professional, you're seeing what's really on this slide. And what's really on this slide is the mid-year assessment results are, we still have half the year to go. But we don't know that unless we're able to attach to mid-year. Number 2 is, this is pretty normal. We're making huge strides in language and literacy for our 4-year-olds. They started in the poverty level without a rich literacy environment. We've moved it tremendously. There's all kinds of great things in here. We just don't know that. And I worry that the context from Monica is XYZ program struggles to prepare children here. We are preparing children here. This is usually the lowest domain. So I wanted we wanted to share this example as kind of a inspiring and cautionary tale, an opportunity to be the context person, take a look at this and go, what might a elected official, what might a journalist say? And this is so important right now. All right, I'm going to disappear back to mute and send it back to Greg for the next example.
And this is essentially just an extension of one of the things that Stuart was showing in that last one, which is that you have to be very careful on the way that you're telling your stories. Also from an annual report, also in the school readiness world. And in this particular case, they make it a little more complicated because they have two y-axes that are on two different things. It's a nice attempt to show something, and then we can sort of talk about whether or not it works as intended. So the left hand y-axis is the percent of the children that met or exceeded the school readiness goal. The right-hand one is the change in percentage met or exceeded. So one of the things that we see, if we kind of look at what we're seeing in this chart, is the lighter purple is winter, the brighter purple is spring, with the dots representing growth. And one of the things here, again, we want to think about, if you're familiar with Head Start and what it means to see winter and spring, you have a sense that's mid-year and end of year. If you're a reporter, you don't necessarily know. If you're a politician, you almost certainly don't know that there's a fall in there somewhere that isn't being displayed here. But the percentage of children meeting or exceeding school readiness goals, one of the things that is important to know when you build a visualization, if the story you're trying to show is your success, does a chart like this show success? If you are looking at these columns, ignore the line there for a minute on percentage gained. If you're just looking at these columns and you're seeing the difference between winter and spring, what's the headline that your natural Mark 1 eyeball is telling you when you see these columns? And feel free to enter that in the chat. Take a moment, think about it, and enter in the chat what the headline is when you see these columns. And again, think of it from a non Head Start expert. So winter to spring, you don't really know what that means other than it's the first category and the second. Wendy's coming in saying there's not much difference. And remember, if you're thinking about a headline, what would a headline be? This is where we find if anybody was a journalist before they joined Head Start. Small improvements made in all school readiness goals. Language lit had the biggest gain from winter to spring. And one of the things that we always want to remember is that there are most people, when they're reading, if they're reading a Head Start annual report, or if they're looking at this data, you want to have a positive sense of it. So there is a little bit of improvement. None of them went down, they all went up. But if you're an elected official and you're talking about whether or not Head Start should get increased funding so that Head Start can comply with all the rules that came in 2024, that increased labor costs and everything else, and just the regular old inflation that everybody is dealing with. Is the difference from 97% in the winter to 97.33% in the spring going to seem meaningful? And this is where Stuart has helped us out here by adding in 90% of the kids were already meeting the goals. So what's the program doing? The difference from 97 to 97.33, that could just be, did the kids sleep well last night? And this can be one of the challenging things, which is probably why we get that percentage gained. Because now what we have in percentage gained is we have this line that looks like it's showing the levels of progress, but the scale's a lot smaller, so it looks like the jumps are bigger. But one of the challenges is it's also drawing this line between the different domains. The domains are not related to each other. So those lines linking them together and showing them, it looks like there's kind of a drop and then it comes up and then there's a drop again. But the domains are all different. There isn't a relationship. One isn't dependent on the other on most of these instruments. So what we have is this is a second example, and I won't belabor the point on it. We have a second example of storytelling where you've chosen in an annual report to display information. That information is in an annual report designed to communicate the effectiveness of the program, but you unintentionally are creating question marks for an audience that may not know anything about Head Start. And one of the things that will often happen is there's a pressure to communicate information in ways like these, where you're communicating it in traditional bar charts in ways that are how things have been done before. But that's not necessarily what you should be doing when you're thinking about storytelling. You don't always need a chart. This is the reality. Even when you're talking about data, a chart isn't necessarily something that you would want to do. Selecting your visualizations of data, the key is not the data, it's the story that you're trying to communicate, the audience you're trying to communicate to, and the avenue through which you are communicating. In an annual report, what you put in there is static, and you can have a little bit of narrative that goes with it, but you're not going to get a guarantee that someone is actually going to read all that narrative. So you do want to have a clear communication of points. And what is the story you're trying to tell? If the story you're trying to tell in this slide is that at the end of the year, 95% of our children have met or exceeded school readiness goals, tell that story. If you want to tell a story of improvement, you can tell that story. But if fall for, say, cognition and general knowledge is 96.5% and winter is 97 and spring is 97.33, there's not going to be any way that you're going to be able to really show that story and have it be a story where you made a lot of progress with those kids because they started so high. And maybe it's a story of how awesome their last year's teachers were, whatever it is. You would want to focus on the end result, the 95%, 97.33% that show the number of kids who are ready for school, have met the school readiness goals, at least. You don't necessarily have to show these big charts that way if your take-home point is our kids are ready to go to kindergarten. So one of the interesting things then is as we think about lots of different ways of talking about data, one of the things that often happens is people forget about qualitative data. So when we think of qualitative and quantitative data, we normally think, well, quantitative, that's numbers. We can understand that. It's math, it's numbers, it's charts. Qualitative data is kind of fuzzier, it's descriptions, there's a lot of different things there. But qualitative data can also be a powerful storytelling too, especially when you can blend it with other elements. So I'm going to take another example here in a different context. This is actually something that's happening right now. You'll see a bunch of examples of these happening all over social media posts from Head Start organizations all over the country. I happened to find a really cool one in my feed. I was actually mocking one up when I found a really good one in my feed from Head Start California, so I totally borrowed it from them. This is Head Start California telling the story of the success of Head Start in a program. The first tile is a story of a particular person. This is Lorena's story. She's a mother. She's talking about how the teacher in the Head Start program had an enormous benefit for her son, that her son was not speaking at all when he started in the Head Start program. But the patience of the teacher that was working with her child not only got her child speaking, but now that her son is in kindergarten, he's one of the top students in the class, and he's reading, speaking, and writing fluently in both English and Spanish. This is a great story. There's a nice picture of the teacher with the two cute kids up there. And this is a real story of a real parent in a real program. And it's a powerful description of the impact that is had. A child who was not speaking had a caring teacher who came in and helped that child. They're not only speaking, they're speaking in multiple languages. And they are exactly what we want, an engaged kindergartner who's ready for success. The other slide is talking about how that story is not special in Head Start because Head Start does this with every child. They focus on building that child to be the best that they can be and to really focus on social and emotional development in nurturing environments with individual supports by quoting the performance standards. So this is an interesting thing. You wouldn't think of quoting the performance standards as cool or interesting or great storytelling, but here it is because I have a personal story that's moving and engaging and connecting. And what I'm showing you by quoting the performance standards is every Head Start program is going to do this with every student because that is part of what our mission, purpose, and also the standard we're being held to by the federal government. So we have a great personal story to build that individual connection with real human circumstances and human feeling, and qualitative data here, a piece of the performance standards that is demonstrating that every Head Start program is held to this. To keep your funding, you must do this. This is an important linkage because what we've got here is really good storytelling using qualitative data that will engage people. Everybody knows somebody, whether it's their own child or the child of a friend or a child in the community, that has really struggled. And a lot of people that I know who came from rough backgrounds all have the story of that teacher that was the teacher that rallied them to take a different path and be more successful in the future, that engaged with them when other people wouldn't. The story of that impactful teacher, you may not have had one, but someone you know did. And you hear stories of that. That engages you in important ways. But is there something more that you could do with this that wasn't part of this campaign that could be added to this to increase the impact and to put an additional emphasis in the environment we're in right now, where what we want to do is talk about the value of Head Start, but we also want to connect it to the broader communities as well. And this is one of those times where we've got a nice solid starting point, and now we want to shift it into something that can be even more valuable. In this particular case, thinking about this as social media posts, we want to keep it short and concise and yet have it be powerful. And so one of the things that we can do here is we can take that idea of the personal with qualitative data and we can extend it in a simple way to bring quantitative data in a straightforward mechanism of an additional tile that can add to this story. So we have our initial pieces here from Head Start California with the hashtag Head Start Works, and these are great. These are impactful. I will also point out that there are a lot of these that are out there. If you are not already looking at these kind of things, working with your state associations, working with the National Head Start Association, they are looking for folks who can contribute stories like this, who can be part of these kind of campaigns. And it's a very good way of telling Head Start stories. I would also argue that if you pull the qualitative data piece out of it, that first tile is pretty solid if you're trying to establish a presence in recruiting and other kinds of things that you're going to be doing no matter what. The idea of having that impactful piece is very valuable. And you could actually say, even in recruitment, having nothing to do with protecting Head Start funding or anything else like that, like not only are we awesome with kids, we have to be awesome with kids. It's our mission, it's our purpose, it's why we're here. I will add a simple tile. And because I have the graphic art skills of a small rock, it's a really simple tile that's right there. And it is just going to say that we have this personal story, we have these other elements. And by the way, there are 73,000 kids just in California that are being helped in these programs. So one of the biggest parts of understanding storytelling with data is that human brains are not really wired for anything more than fingers and toes counting. So when you say 73,000, most observers' brains just say, that's a big number. There's a lot of kids that are helped. They won't remember the statistic. They will remember that there's a lot. They also have no idea how many kids there are in California. And so they're going to naturally associate that with there's a lot of kids out there. And there are definitely going to be kids in my community and in my area that are impacted by this. So here what we've done is we've taken that personal story and that qualitative data that together were very powerful storytelling tools. We've added that additional step of quantitative data that scales this to create an impression in the minds of the people hearing the story that there's a lot of people benefiting this program. Personal story, This is a powerful story of a teacher making a massive impact on this child's life, a non-verbal student, not only becoming a student who engages verbally, but a student who engages verbally in multiple languages and is thriving, not just in the Head Start program, but afterwards in kindergarten. There's a lot of layers there. Not only is this a great story, but every Head Start program is required to do these things. And oh, by the way, there are 73,000 kids. The takeaway thing that we are moving to with this is we move from personal to general, and we build the power of that story. Wow, it's so great that Head Start helped that kid. This is the piece you want someone to take away from it. It's like, that's awesome. This is great. Head Start is really doing awesome things. That kid's story is amazing. It's great to hear. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I remember when my friend's child was struggling with these issues when they were younger. It would have been great if there were people who could have helped them. And then there's the whoa, like, wow, they do that for every child. That's part of what the federal government holds them to. They actually do that for every child, and they're actually accountable for that. The thing that goes through most people's minds is, well, the government actually does hold people accountable. That's actually impressive. The fact that you're accountable for this kind of engagement, that's huge. And then, wow, that's a lot of kids. A lot of kids are benefiting from this. And this is where the power of the storytelling really comes to its full form, is that you are creating an impression in the audience, whoever they are. If it's on social media, it's practically everybody. But the impression in that audience of the value of the program and the depth and breadth of the program as well. Because these, if they're part of a campaign, which they are right now, because everyone's trying to save Head Start, you don't just have this story, you have a bunch of other stories of kids in different contexts, families in different contexts, parents. You have a staff member who used to be a parent who can tell the story of how Head Start helped them. And then they were inspired to come work at Head Start and now help others. These personal stories bubbling up with these headlines that you can register in the minds of the people that are hearing them and seeing them. These are powerful storytelling techniques. And so
Greg,
there's a
I'll
lot
jump
of
in.
different things you can do. Go
I'll
ahead, sir.
jump in. Yeah, I'll jump in real quick here. So we've spent some time here with takeaway points, and we spent some time here. We kind of tuck in the what do I take from this webinar along the way. And I've been listening very carefully in and around my little part. And some of the most important takeaway points have been, make sure that the data isn't the lead and what brains and people remember. This little scaffold here on the screen can be very helpful for you right now. Start with the personal story so that everybody attaches to it, and then basically build the takeaway around it. And when Greg lays this out, Head Start California did a nice job. You see the name and you think about that boy being readier, and you think about the relief of the parent, you think about the gratitude of the parent, you think about whatever it was the program did to get him ready to read. And then you see this accountability and structure and formality piece to it, and then you see it's helping everybody. And in the world of legislators, in the world of support, in the world of people saying, does this place make a difference? Are they held accountable? Is it worth it? Are they solving poverty? This is a really nice scaffold. So one takeaway from today in this hour is this slide. It'll get sent to you. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. It's exactly right. You're going to grab it and say, let's go with this idea. The next last two slides, and then we'll kind of work toward the wrap up, are somewhat checklisty too. In other words, I got something in one round where I can go, do I have this in place? Check. Do I have this in place? Ooh, I need to work on that. So I just wanted to frame the next two in that way. Greg, I can drive through them or not, or you could.
Yeah, go for it, sir.
Yeah. So next slide, in the same vein. Who is the audience? We teach a lot of storytelling. We're often surprised at how often someone hasn't defined their audience. That annual report is a perfect example. Who's reading this? And they're like, the people, we published it. I'm like, a journalist. Now let's think. So think who your audience is. How are you going to tell your story? That format we just gave you is a good thing to experiment with. What's your central goal in telling the story? If I'm thinking about that scaffold that Greg just put up there, my central goal is Head Start works. Perhaps it's this, someone holds them accountable. Perhaps it's this, money well spent. Perhaps it's this, lots of kids served. Now, Greg and I tell a lot of stories. Your central goal is worth sitting down with your leadership team and saying, what is the central goal? A lot of kids served, we're worth giving money to. Support us by volunteering. This is how in-kind works and why we need you to do it. So defining your central goal can really give a lot of definition to what you're working on. Do not skip the fourth bullet. This is a fifth bullet. If you don't start with a personal connection, no one really cares. So the story better be about a human. Every Pixar, every Pixar movie follows the exact same story spine. Once upon a time, everything was like this until this happened to this person. And then they just take the entire story from there. Then I'd actually like to shrink the font on the last bullet. Then what data elements are you bringing in? Then what are you going to say about it? Because, and I'll speak in the circle of truth in our little tiny Zoom meeting here. Some of the data you guys have around ERSI, around school readiness, around family engagement, it's kind of boring. It doesn't show a lot. And Greg put one up there, 93, 93, 93. I'm like, what are we doing here? So be advised, if it doesn't come with the whole wrapper of the human and the takeaway, why are you showing it? And we've seen this mistake a lot, which is you put the chart up and start telling a story around it. Like, you want to have your story before that chart goes anywhere near it. And if you don't like the chart, make a new chart. But this is how Greg has labeled this an approach to human-centered stories. And then the last sequence here, it has to do with literally telling the story. So practice, don't memorize, practice with an audience, practice with the tools in the media you're going to use. And then with static media, show it to as many people as you can who represent the audience, and don't be afraid to change or adapt along the way. The big takeaway from this is you'll be surprised at how much you will adapt your storytelling based upon how it goes. And Greg and I are both teachers. All the time we get all puffed up about how it's going to go. And at the end, Nancy's our helper. She's like, whelps. And we're like, well, got to shorten that, got to simplify that, got a big arrow on that. So I'll say this very bluntly, version 1 is always version 1. And you will be way happier with version 4. So get out there. Greg, anything to add to that? That's all I want to say about those 2 slides. So.
No, I mean, that's basically it. The biggest thing is when you're going back, you just want to make sure that you're being intentional about your storytelling. Just walk through those questions, and that will help you. But also think in terms of, wow, those weren't big, complicated visuals that were put together by Head Start California. Those were simple. And next month, when we do the webinar, where we're going to talk about outcomes and engagement with community, one of the things is going to be a simple, effective story that makes the connections is a lot more powerful than the coolest data visualization that you can build. And you can go on Tableau Public is a place where nerds like to go create visuals, and some of them are super cool. And you look at it like, that's amazing, it's really pretty, and I don't care because it doesn't tell me anything meaningful at all, but it's pretty. In the Head Start world, the most important thing for everybody right now is just building a sense among people in your communities, in your areas, of the value of your program. And the best way to do that is a simple human story connected to the mission and purpose of the organization, connected to by just how many people your programs help. And it doesn't have to be 73,000 in California. It can be the 425 kids in your community that have no other childcare, and their parents can only work because they're going to your Head Start program, or the only way they're going to see a dentist is if they do it in the Head Start program, or 1,000 other examples that you work with every day that are the foundation of exactly that kind of little scaffold, and that you can build again and again and again, simply and in a straightforward way. And the more of those you have out there, the more people know about Head Start. And it's awesome. So we're at the question and answer portion of our program. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or just drop them in the chat and we're happy to answer them.
And then Greg, well, people, if they have any questions, they can type them. We will answer them. If you can go forward to the next slide. I just want to tick through some of the stuff coming
what's
up.
Happening at Acorn?
Yeah, what's happening at Acorn. And one thing I want to share with everybody is we just got back, Greg and I, from Columbus, and we were at the NHSA conference, and I put a presentation together about professional development and just how important it is. So I want to preface this by saying at Acorn, we're always working on what we offer, who we offer it to, and why. And right now, the Head Start this last 5 months have been so tough on all of us. So one of the things I did with everybody in the room at the national conference is say, take a big, huge, deep breath. Really great things were happening in PD before we got clobbered the last 5 months. The performance standards were like, we really want to be investing in our staff around management skills and staff wellness. So I want to make a point about what's coming up here at Acorn, and Nancy has all this information for you that will be in the follow-up email. But the first is next Friday is a better pre-service workshop. Greg and I placed that in June because pre-service comes up, boom, in a blink of an eye. Some of you have already had it kind of planned, but this is a terrific workshop, 3 hours of takeaway tools to make your pre-service better, stickier, more engaging, funner. That's a real word. So I really want to encourage you to take a look at that. We've taken a series of terrific professional development workshops about managing in the real world, and we put them into a manager skills certificate that involves leadership, communicating, building a culture of motivation, managing. Most of the management offerings in Head Start are around performance standards and around what you need to know in content areas. This is a management in the real world of real people every day. It's very popular. It starts on the 6th, and it's a series of workshops that are spread throughout the fall. We've got Data Camp. That is our core thing we've been doing for over a decade. August 13 and 14, 3 hours each. It's in partnership with many of the state associations, and it is open for enrollment right now. It is perfect for any center director, manager, or leadership team member, content lead who works with data in their job, pretty much every single Head Start leader. The data analyst certificate Greg talked about earlier, he's the teacher of that program, and that's where you can basically take data from your primary management system, Go Engage, COPA, Child Plus, and build something wonderful, simple, and refreshable to solve a problem or make things easier on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis. I call it Greg's special hackometer, and it's awesome, and it works great. And then our flagship program, I can see in here, I recognize so many of these names, Dennis, Dolce, Melanie, Monica, Wendy, who have gone through our data literacy credential program that's in partnership with NHSA. It is 8 weeks, and it is absolutely streamlined and wonderful now to make you into a terrific data leader in your program. So I wanted to make sure everybody knows that we are busy offering high quality professional development. Nancy's dropped all the links in the chat. Back to you, Greg.
Just as a quick thing, and so again, any questions, feel free to drop in the chat. If you are interested in a more applied piece of it, we have a session that we're doing twice in the next month or so with Head Start or the Arizona Head Start Association and then Head Start California. So tomorrow, actually, from 11 to noon with the folks at the Arizona Head Start Association, and on June 26th, 3 p.m. Pacific with Head Start California, we are doing a webinar that is about the actual building and communicating of 3 different types of communication. The first is a 60 to 90-second elevator speech. The second is a short PowerPoint presentation, 5 minutes or less. And then the final one is how to build infographics that have little tiles, like the ones you saw demonstrated there by Head Start California, which can be put together in larger forms of communication, like an annual report, but that can also be sliced up to communicate using social media to talk about what your program does. So that basically, what are some easy, straightforward ways that you can learn to do that can be used for any kind of communication you want, whether it's talking about the impact of your program or it's just putting together a collection of those little elevator speeches. So that if you're talking to people who might potentially want to join your Head Start program or families out in the community during recruitment, all those kind of things, you can have those together as well as within your program or talking to elected officials or other folks. So an interesting applied version of it. We're going to talk about kind of structurally how to put them together and practice them for those 2 that are coming up. A month from now or so is part 2 of this sequence. This is telling your Head Start story part 2. You'll only have me in this one. Stuart will not be able to be there. And I'm going to talk about impact, outcomes, and community with a real emphasis on simplified ways of communicating these things, doing kind of new model. Some of it we're going to have some annual report examples, but a very different kind that are using new models of annual reporting to communicate with a lot simpler modes of communication, but also ones that can then be used as they're put into the annual report directly in social media posts and other things like that, as well as being the foundation for short video content and other things like that. So lots of wild, fun stuff coming down the pipeline for us. So as we wrap up here, we have 5 minutes left. We're happy to take questions, but I really just do want to say thank everybody for coming in. We really appreciate it. All of our various programs are out there on Acorn Learning. Time is the single most valuable thing that you all have, and you spent an hour of it with us today to talk about storytelling and how to help people to communicate the power and effectiveness of Head Start in rural communities, in city communities, in every community across the entire country. We appreciate you taking an hour to spend with us today on that. So happy to answer any questions that anybody has at this point. But once again, thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck with everything at your programs. Hope to see you at one of our events soon.